Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. The next Industry 5.0 Wasteless Work Talks are here with Bill, Kevin, Mark, and myself. We will write on a back of a language. And today's term consists of two words. It's a mental block. And the reaction was very strange a minute ago when I announced it, so I will start with you, Bill. So when you hear for the first time mental block, what came first to your mind, please?
Well, what came first to my mind, because I may be a few days older than you guys, is the inability to come up with a name or a word in the conversation. But shortly behind that was another one which I will give you, and that is some people have a mental inability to go to certain subjects. Um, they cannot talk about somebody uh, nicely or think about somebody nicely. They may not be able to talk about an experience or a time in their lives because it is too painful and their subconscious won't let them go there. I'm not sure what the psychiatrists say about a definition for this word. That's just what came to mind.
Thank you very much. What about you, Kevin? Mental block.
Um, yeah, mental block. I think there's three kinds of mental block. There's this kind of mental block when you approach something and you just think you can't do it. And I have a mental block with numbers. Anything to do with mathematics is just not for me. And I come to that point that I don't even look at it because I assume automatically I'm not going to get this. So I managed to block it out. So for me, numbers don't exist. And the other kind of mental block is, in a way, like Bill has hinted at, it is kind of age related, but also it seems to go in periods. So, the older you get, the more you appreciate the weeks of lucidity. And then suddenly there'll be a week where nothing seems to make any sense. And the memory's just not what it was. And that may be connected to the third kind of mental block, which is the hangover that comes from drinking whiskey. Because I think with when you drink most alcohol, the hangover is painful. But with whiskey, it's this remarkable state where every connection in your brain has simply disconnected itself. So you just sit like a zombie for 24 hours. It's quite nice, but you can't think.
Oh,
Mark, what about you and mental block?
Well, honestly, just say, I mean, here I am struggling with that whiskey thing. Yeah, we'll come back to that. When you first said mental block, my immediate reaction was, yes, creative constipation. Okay, and then following on whether it's forgetfulness, it's incredible how a mental block can either be intentional or unintentional. So intentional, I don't want to talk about it. I wish to ignore it. The world can go on. I don't need to know about it. Forget it. Okay? I'm looking the other way. And then there's the unintentional mental block. I really do want to remember it. I really do want to remember your name. And I can't. And then there's that little gap in between the two. So I am appalling. I mean, Kevin was saying on numbers. For me, it's names. Okay. So I know I have this wonderful universe of contacts, and I could replace all the names in my contacts list with the word you. I go to parties, I meet yous everywhere, okay? And it's amazing. I know their life stories, I know, the various things about them, but can I remember their names? I'm appalling at it, okay? Yet I remember so many other things. But I think creative constipation is the one that probably I struggle with most.
You know, the word was yesterday or today in the morning introduced by Jane. And it was, you know, many words in English, we have many explanations for one word in Czech. But this one, she did not explain mental block. She tried to say block, or there is a many words for the term, překážka in Czech. And we just look at the vocabulary, and there were so many different names. And one of them was mental block. And the translation is very different to what you said. In Czech, mental block means, I open it here, mean obstacle in learning.
Okay.
So, yes, it's not the result of something I forgot and so on, but it's obstacle to learn something, which interestingly, even in the noon discussion, nobody mentioned, which may result in the fact that our translation into Czech is completely wrong.
Not
And
sure there's a right or a wrong.
uh, uh,
Okay.
I know what you mean. I just say it was very strange for me to listen to the discussion at the noon because it was similar to what you said, except of the whiskey, Kevin. But but it was quite interesting, you know. And we came at the end because all the discussion was about a person, about personal experience. But at the end, I was asking myself and my guest, I was asking, does exist a society mental block? So group mental block? And we came to a conclusion, probably yes. Do you think the same?
The one thought that had come up to me was how some people are just not able to say something nice about other people, or they have a mental block from being that sort of person. And I think I suspect societies and cultures are a lot like that too. They don't, their brain just doesn't go there. Um, I was reading something yesterday about handicapped people, and in the indigenous populations, Native Americans, Indians, we used to call them, um, they do not try to treat people with mental disabilities. They accept them. They surround them with love. They surround them with the community, uh, with nature. They don't send them off to a mental institution or try to treat them with drugs. Uh, and so, in that way, um, the American Indian or the indigenous populations oftentimes have an obstacle about treating people the way the experts say they should be treated, right? And there's probably a lot of different examples like that.
Any comment from you, Kevin?
I was thinking in terms of society's mental blocks, there's a couple of ways to look at it. And you think of the state of Europe at the moment and the decline is going to go through. And most people, of course, want to block that reality from their everyday lives. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. So we might as well get on and make the most of our lives that we can without worrying too much about things we have no control over. But there comes a point where instead of making the most of your life, you do actually hide from reality. And I think in that respect, the mental block refers more to the fact that we're kidding ourselves and we're hiding from the truth.
I would agree with that, except for the very first point you made about conditions in Europe, and I would say certainly conditions in the US as well.
Hmm.
And I
Isn't it
think,
funny?
yes, Mark.
Isn't it funny how we do have common mental blocks. One of those is we all tend to have a mental block about how long we've got left, how much life, there's this comfort factor of life will continue as it is. And perhaps I've just been reading some strange things recently, but accounts of people just keeling over, always unexpectedly, okay, or in these cases, all unexpectedly. And it's really funny the way that people can have a mental block about the future, and as if it's not going to happen, yet it is inevitable. It's strange. The other thing is, just going back to the translations, and also probably the whiskey as well, it was interesting that when the first translation software was introduced, there was this attempt to take certain phrases in English and translate them to Russian, and then translate them back from the Russian into English. And so one that was done was out of sight, out of mind. Okay, and so that was translated into Russian, and then the Russian translation was translated back into English, and what came up was blind drunk.
That's a long and winding road, isn't it?
It is wonderful the way we can have those mental blocks, but some are intentional, some are unintentional. So on that learning one, is it that Kevin was at school and whenever maths came up, he switched off and found the view out of the window far more interesting? Okay, intentional. Okay, or was it unintentional because he was attending a school in a foreign country in a foreign language and didn't understand a word the teacher was saying? That I would consider unintentional. And both of them end up producing a mental block over mathematics.
The reason why I asked about the mental block of society was, can we unblock it? Because I think that there is a lot of negative things happening because of this block. We are thinking the politicians must be voted and there should be a right and left party and whatever. There's a lot of war. I think that war is a result of some kind of mental block. And I do worry that the giants implement the mental blocks intentionally.
Mental blocks are very good for control.
Yes. It's the same at work to implement mental blocks among the workers or your co-workers, however you want to say it, to get them not to go off the deep end, to focus, and that's really the job of managers is to get the workers engaged and in the right direction. And mental blocks is a useful tool for that.
I just had a workshop yesterday. There has been 3 great people participating from a company which was recently, it was a big company, but it was bought by a bigger company because their company was very, very future oriented. So they have a lot of innovations, introduce a lot of, so everybody was thinking they are buying us because of the innovation, so they will scale up in a scale. And these people say, they bought us because the innovation, but the only thing we cannot do anymore is innovation. So they keep them silent. And generally, I have exactly the same experience with the Japanese company, which hired me as a manager. They hired me because I was crazy and I deliver a lot of different things which can turn into business. At the end, I was so far from them that we have to go our way because it was too much innovations for the Japanese. So I think that even the giants and the big ones has their own block implemented. That they don't see they are already out of order. They don't see that the decision taken is their decision, and they say no, it was your decision. They generally ignore their own error and so on. So I think that we can unblock. The only thing what I don't know is how to. And my question to you is, what is the opposite of mental block? Is it a creativity? I don't think so.
I think it's realism. I think that the function of a mental block is to avoid reality.
Realism.
And so the one thing about reality is that it won't be ignored. And so that's the main cure to a mental block is like in Europe, we pretend that we can electrify and have electric cars, but we simply could never generate that much electricity to do that. And these politicians, they're still pushing forward this ridiculous 2030 proposals. And they're absolutely, you can say it's a mental block or it's a kind of blindness, but they simply refuse to accept reality. And sooner or later, reality will come knocking at the door.
Kevin, I very much agree with what you said. I just have to throw one thing in, and that is I'm not sure what reality is. So how do we get back to reality if we can't
Maybe,
agree on the definition?
maybe we should call it consequences rather than reality.
I like consequences. I like that a lot because people who get in trouble oftentimes do it because they're ignoring the consequences. I have a couple family members, a personal story, but yes, I like consequences.
You know, I was riding yesterday to the workshop to another city, and it was sunrise. It was very early in the morning, and I was looking at the rear mirror, and I was thinking, what I see? Do I see future because the sun was rising, or do I see the past because it's a rear mirror, or do I see the present? It was so interesting thought. I took few pictures. I shouldn't, but I took a few pictures. They are beautiful. And at the end, when I look at them, I realized that on the other side, it was on the highway. There is the moving truck exactly with this moving. You see it; it's moving generally, and I think that the reality is hard to explain, but easy to explain at the same time. It's just what I call the power of touch. Touch it, and the result of one of the result of the feedback of the workshop is a feedback, immediate feedback by the participants. And I took there a lot of different material samples for packaging. There has been packaging experts. And one of the feedback says he's good, he's experienced, and he brought us materials which we did not know, even we are working with packaging every single day. And I think this is the recognition of the reality, you know. But there should be something general which will help us. And I don't know what it is. I would like to use it. Yes, Mark?
I was going to say, the problem with the term reality is that we are looking almost at pure truth. And the closest we tend to come to reality is consensus. So when scientists claim that something happens if you do A, B, or C, and other scientists can replicate the experiments and get the same results, then there is consensus amongst that community that this is the truth until someone comes up with another fact. And with people, to tell people what one passionately believes is reality and truth and others don't get it, it doesn't happen ending up with frustration all round. And that frustration can, in the worst cases, lead to conflict. We've seen it with religious wars. We've seen it with so many things. And people are adept at framing arguments. And one of the points on those arguments is the old marketing thing that if you want to build a brand, you need 5 factors. Okay. You need to have a solution. You need to have a long-term vision. You need to have a clear enemy. You need a narrative. You need people to have symbolism, and you need a sense of belonging. 5 things. And you can trace it through religions, through long-term brands, many other things. And I think that when one sees these things coming together, it is possible to try to get consensus. But the moment someone is pushing one vision and claiming there is one enemy, then it is impure, and it is putting a fault into the argument from the outset.
You know, I just checked on Google the origin of the word reality. And here it is. The word reality originates from Latin realitas, a thing, delivered from realis, actual, and some more description. You know, I am coming back again to Industry 5.0. Time to time, I'm asking AI and different search engines, who is the founder? Until last year, it was European Commission. Yesterday, it says on the first result, Microrada. I checked several languages, the same. Several AI agents, the same. And then I said, okay, so it's easy to make the connection. But who is Microrada? And that's more interesting because some say it's the founder of Industry 5.0, but the others are careful because the Microrada is not a common name, but only on LinkedIn there has been 55 Microradas. 2 of them we are living in Pilsen, so exactly the same name. But it was quite interesting, and I suggested to people to. It says Google your name. It's quite interesting to see the result, and the question is where the reality match the current situation, because it's so fastly developing, especially the tech, that I think that the tech make the mental block very strong tool.
Okay, that's very interesting, Michael, on that. But let me just come back to that last point. So I was having a discussion with someone this week on the merits or risks of AI, where it could be deployed, etc. Very interesting discussion. And we were talking about some academic papers and some books and various things. And each time, this particular individual told me how he had used AI to get a synopsis of the book, the paper, okay? And he was doing it with maybe 5 AI tools. And then he was going back with his own prompts and checking, and he was getting all of these views. And I mentioned one particular book to him. And he said, oh, yes, I did that check the other day. And I said, right, well, I'll talk to you tomorrow. He sent it over to me. And sure enough, here was a synopsis of the book. The problem was that the impact of reading the synopsis, and even this tool's or this group of tools' views on the execution of the ideas was quite interesting. I was left with a sense of letdown. And the reason was I was reminded of when we first started getting music, downloading it online, and we could get any album we wanted. There are a whole series of tools out there for us to get everything we could ever want. And what I found incredible was that once you started using these tools, first of all, you went after the artists that you really liked and you downloaded all their albums, everything they'd ever recorded. And then, of course, you got the bootlegs of concerts by those artists. Then you went on to get other artists that you'd heard of or were mildly interested in. And it suddenly dawned on me that I had switched from a love of music to simply an accumulation of files. And as I accumulated, my appreciation collapsed. And the reason I just mention this is that when we're looking at tools, we're looking at decisions, we're looking at truth and reality, we're looking at very complex structures that form opinions, ideas, movements, initiatives. And it's very easy for all of us, myself included, to focus on a few strands of what's going on and missing the larger picture. And the only thing that makes me feel good is if I go back to my original response to mental block, to creative constipation, is that the good news is that scientists have found a cure for constipation. And with that, I feel relieved that we can actually go on in our own ways. I'll stop there.
I think just jumping back to reality for a minute, I don't think reality is an agreement on facts. I think reality is a situation. And I think that the more, this is really a common human insight, but the more unpleasant the situation is, the more real it is. You know, if you win $2 million in the lottery, it's a dream come true. But you know, if you suddenly have to pay a huge bill on your house or the damn thing will fall down, that's reality. There's nothing dreamlike about that. So I think generally reality is an unpleasant situation.
That's interesting. You know, I just inform you that 3 hours ago, my first grandchild in a second marriage was born. Her name is Bianca. She's beautiful. And for me, it's a completely new reality, which started with my life with Jane. So, is it a new reality or is it a simultaneous or whatever reality which I live right now for almost a year? The question is how we can get it. Mark, as you said about the summaries and collecting of the MP3s, I do understand fully. Of course, I have my own, a lot of, but I hate the summary of books. The reason is that I love books, and the summary is not the book. It's just a take out few sentences, whatever the main person. I don't think I will understand the book the same as I do understand it when I read the whole one. It's a completely different, and to be honest, I hate it. So I don't read it.
Why do you use AI then?
I don't use it.
Okay.
I watch it, but I don't use it intentionally. Not a single time I did use it. For the search and for the reply, I compare different models to answer the same question, because I know some people say Industry 5.0 was made by AI. That's completely nonsense. It was introduced by me, not AI. And this make me in a very good position, you know. I am simply the author. So I can say when it was invented, because there was nobody before, and it's not my opinion that was stated by others. So that's a good position, which I can compare the results and the development. But Bill, you would like to say something?
You mentioned that a book you love books, so you read the books, and I would suggest that if you read the same book 5 years from now, you will love it for different reasons.
For sure. I have one issue. I do not read books twice because I do remember them. And that's an issue for me. There are only two books which I read again and again. One is Prophet from Khalil Jabbar. It's 19th century. And the second is the Art of Painting, which is 15th century, and it's a Japanese book. These two are very small, very thin books. I show it in the past, I think. And they are all the answers. And exactly as you said, every single time when I read it, I understand it slightly different. But I love it.
So that goes back to the definition of the word reality. So are you in a different reality now than you were when you read it 5 years ago? And I would suggest that you are a different person now than you were when this show started 40 minutes ago. So that then says something about um, the word consensus. It says something about the word reality. Uh, and maybe what it's saying is that there are 8 billion different realities, and an hour from now there will be 8 billion times 8 billion different realities. So how do we handle this this number of different realities that is almost unhandleable? Um, except to stay open and keep the funk open and listen, and but at the same token, at the same time, you have to have a mental block about certain things. So for example, I have a mental block about Trump and about a lot of the giants, actually. Um, and I need to focus on me. I need to focus on today. I need to focus on, I can't deal with all the different realities that are out there. I can't deal with that. So I have to do things that some people don't like. I have to have certain biases. I have to pigeonhole things. I have to, you know what I mean? It's just tough. There's so much reality, so many variations of reality out there. I'm sorry.
I don't know if you remember, I asked you whether you can stop thinking means to have completely empty head. The brain is empty. It's like meditation. I do it during our talks. I do it during many discussions. I just leave the thoughts coming in, but the brain is completely empty. And then I ask a question. And I just wonder whether this state of mind is the way to maybe not to avoid, but maybe to avoid the unintentional mental blocks. Because the intentionally you apply by yourself, it's your protection. But the unintentionally, when I enter a door, what? I am accepting there are 8 million different realities every second. I'm fine with it. I don't complain. I just live with this. But can you stop thinking intentionally?
When Mark and I first met, we were discussing an English rock band called Hawkwind. And Hawkwind's music is famous for one thing, and that is you listen to Hawkwind while consuming reality altering substances. And I think that you can't turn off the brain, but you can certainly avoid reality in a lot of different ways, with meditation, with drugs, with alcohol, with denial. So there are a number of ways to avoid reality.
We have 3.5 minutes left.
Only 3 minutes. If I look at a painting, the reality of the painting is that it is of a certain size. It has certain colors in it. It takes a certain form of, is it oil on canvas? What is it? There's a reality, there's a truth, there's a scientific component to it. The amazing thing, though, is that there is another element that goes quite beyond reality, which is the impact of the painting on me. And that impact, yes, I can be in a meditative state when I approach it, but I find that often that stimulus is one of the most effective ways of removing a mental block. And it is not reality that's removing the mental block. It's the impact of the work of art on my head, on my brain, and what it triggers within that. And it's not reality. It is rather touching on elements of my brain that I might not have been thinking about before. Indeed, it could have been a vacuum.
You know, I was a few days ago over weekend. We have been with Jane to Salvador Dali exhibition in Prague. I love Salvador Dali. I love a lot of his work. But I never ever thought that the names, the titles of the pictures are so interesting. And I do recommend everyone just to read the titles of Salvador Dali's pictures. It's a poem, it's a story. It's not just one word. It's so describing that the titles make me more fascinating than the pictures themselves. Very interesting. And this is what you said, Mark. I think it's the part I never thought a description of a picture or a title, it's not a description, a title will have more impression on me than the picture itself. Very interesting. And this at the last minute hit. So thank you for your time. It's a lot of reality which we discuss, and I think we unblock a lot of the blocks. So have a nice time, free of waste and wasting in all its forms. Stay safe, be free, be human, and don't let the block disturb your view. See you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right.